Right, my name's Denis Teal. Lived in Bromyard since 1957. Was born 6 miles out of Bromyard, and never travelled far much since, except when I was in the forces. Um, been in the grocery trade most of my life. Started in a grocery store just up the road here. That was the highest class grocer in town. He had an off licence. He was the only one in town with an off licence because he knew all the magistrates and served them all. So that was it. And a wonderful man. But
you were telling me, I remember now, that you used to get orders from the hop.
That's where they used to. We
Could you just tell us what was the name of the place, and if you could just put the name into your answer and then describe
what of the farm that we used to do.
The farm and the name of the grocers.
Yeah, Parker's of Instant Court was the farm. Very, very nice people, gentry really. And they used to have a number of hop pickers, I suppose, probably not as many as what Margaret was saying, but somewhere in the region of 50. And Mrs. Parker used to get all the orders, and she used to, because their writing wasn't very good, so she used to write out the orders, bring them in a sheaf. We used to assemble them, wrap them up in brown paper parcels and deliver them. And then Mrs. Parker used to give us a cheque for them, and she used to, so we didn't have any dealings with the hop pickers as such. We dealt with the farmer's wife. Yes, and he was, he, as I say, he knew all the right people in the town. In the Christmas time, he used to, I don't know whether I told you this, but he had a number of cases of Vino Sacro wine, which is the altar wine for the churches. And the first week after Christmas, he'd go round all the churches and give the vicar a bottle of whiskey and a couple of cases of this, 6 in a case, of this Vino Sacro wine. Now, this was wonderful advertising because everyone who moved into the village knew the vicar, would go and see the vicar. The vicar would say, "Oh, if you want your groceries, Mr. Owen is the chappie to see. He's a tea blender, and he's probably blended the tea for the well in your yard." And so they would come in with a little bottle of water, and Mr. Owen would check it out and make tea to suit this the water that it was a con trick, but gee, it worked.
That you painted that amazing scene, coming up top of Bishop's Room. Could you do that again for us?
Yes, well, I used to go with a young lady from out at Newton, Lower Eggleton, which is the other side Bishop's Room, and I used to come through Bishop's Room late at night. And if the pubs were just turning out, it was quite hairy driving through Bishop's Room, because one had to sort of slow down quite slowly, and probably running over broken beer bottles and what have you. I was on a motorbike. And there used to be a policeman down there that used to keep things in order. He'd have his truncheon out, and if he'd probably knock 2 or 3 out. But never went to court. Nothing ever went to court. He always ran a very tight ship. And when you got to the top of the bank, I used to stop because it was such a wonderful scene. And I've thought it since, like, wouldn't it be lovely for my children to have seen this? There was a huge field where the hop pickers used to stay, and they mostly were horse-drawn caravans. And the horses were tethered behind the caravans, and all the caravans were in a huge circle, and they had one big campfire in the centre. And there'd be someone playing an accordion, probably someone singing, probably a group singing. And to look down on this scene of a early autumn night was absolutely wonderful. Well, the hop picking was a way of life round here in that those days. Um, the locals used to go hop picking down in the local farm down here at Pasks, um, and they were like I think I told you before. My old aunts used to go down there as just as the day was breaking, and they'd stay down there till it was dark at night to buy the winter coal. And as Margaret was saying, like the bushler was a very difficult job because they used to say, oh, he puts his elbow in the top after, to press him down a bit. and like, because it wasn't a weight, you see, it was just a basket that was level full was a bushel. So like it wasn't, if he sort of pushed the first lot down, you could get a lot more in, and he had to be fair to the farmer, because if he was a light bushler, then the farmer was going to lose out on it, and if he was a heavy bushler, then the hop picker would lose out on it. So there were some quite arguments around that, as Margaret said. And if they did go on strike, it was quite a thing. It was quite a thing. But they held the farmer at ransom because the weather was going. You see, as towards the end of hop picking, it really wasn't nice. It was usually probably the first week in October, second week in October, and it was mucky and muddy. And as I say, my wife went down there. She never went out to work other than that. I think she did a bit of currant picking, but she would push the pram down through the mud to this, and it was right nice, really. They used to have a little fire and boil a tin kettle and make a cup of tea and have sandwiches, and it was really nice. But it was a way of life, and all the locals, those down the Pasks, I don't think they had any inflow. They were all local people because they could all walk down there, you see. Yeah, well, as I say, my wife didn't go out to work in general, but hop picking she did, because her aunts went down there and she went down there with the baby in the pram and what have you. And we made enough money to buy our first TV. Yeah. When Crossroads was on, because I used to come home to lunch and watch Crossroads.
You touched on it briefly about him,
Yes, he was.
Do you know his name?
Amos, yeah. Amos was the last one, wasn't he? There was 2 or 3, but Amos, yeah, it was he a sergeant?
PC?
Well, PC Amos, he was a mountain of a man, and he would sort it all out. If anything got stolen, which not much did, but if anything got stolen or some misdemeanor was performed in the area and they knew it was the gypsies, he wouldn't go and try and sort it out with the gypsies. He would go to the head one of the gypsies, the one who was in charge of them all, sort of, and he would go to him and he would get it sorted. He would get it sorted, probably not in the kindest sort of way, but in the way that satisfied the person that the misdemeanor was sorted against. Yeah, it was a way of life. But the people that came up, they were lovely people, and some got married, married local people, and stayed around here forever.
Did Bromyard change much during the season?
Oh yes, yes. I was talking to a man in the supermarket in Leicester yesterday, and he worked for Halfords the dairy. Well, I think it was 1962, we had a very, very heavy snow. The whole area was closed down, and so he used to have to walk around the town with milk for the townspeople, and everybody else. So they used to try and get in and get it as best they could. So like it closed down, the whole town. And the little villages were probably closed for weeks. And then they sent a gang of men out to dig it out with shovels. Oh yes, the pubs used to water the beer. No, I might be I might be stepping out of line. But apparently they did so that they didn't get so drunk, and then they could put the beer a little bit cheaper, and they could drink plenty, but they didn't get drunk quite so quickly. Because Bromyard was well represented by pubs. We had an awful lot of pubs in Bromyard, and see in those days it's difficult to realise now how different it was, but in those days a lot of farmers didn't have cars. They come in a pony and trap. My mother did. And if they did have a car, it was only one. So the farmer would bring his wife in the morning, and then he'd be up at the market all day buying and selling his stock. And then they would do the rest of the business in the pubs. And of course the wife then was a prisoner here until he decided to go home. All the pubs had backyards, and like I used to have to take groceries over to the backyard of the hot pole and the backyard of the what now is the inn, but it used to be the White Horse, the Bay Horse, and put it in the cars, and then the women would sort of just keep shopping until he decided to go home, and the pubs closed. They were open all day on a Thursday. It was because in those days they opened at 11 and closed at 3. And even in the off licence that we had at Owen's, you had to put a sheet over the wines and spirits from between up till 11 and after 3. I don't know. I didn't. They were general workers, and they used to come round in a lorry in the morning. A lot of them just came. They weren't resident, because they in the potato picking and the time when they needed extra work, they'd probably be 5 or 6 dropped at the farm and that. And they'd come round with a soldier in the back of the vehicle with a rifle. Whether it was ever loaded or not, I don't know. But I never heard of any trouble with it, because they were hand-picked. Because there was some, I suppose, it were died in the wool Nazis that they wouldn't have sent out to farms. But a lot of them were just good, honest to goodness people, and thought, well, if we can get to work on a farm, we're never going to be hungry.